Can we talk for a minute about our Integrating Heart and Mind workshop?
Absolutely. I'm excited. It's coming up in the fall of 2024.
I'm so excited. We changed the format to make it more accessible to people with like work schedules and personal schedules. And so this time we're going to do it 3 hours on a Friday afternoon or evening, depending on where you're at, and 5 hours on Saturday for 2 different weeks in September.
Yeah, it's so great. Like if you're finding yourself stuck in like sticky bad patterns or having communication issues or something like that, or if you want to just like get closer and trust yourself or your partner more, this is the workshop for you.
Yeah, and individuals are welcome, couples are welcome. If you're interested in really thinking through how to serve yourself well inside of your relationships, then we've built a workshop that will support you in finding the ways that are just right for you.
To sign up, head over to our website at whydoesmypartner.com/events.
We hope you'll join us. Welcome to the Why Doesn't My Partner podcast.
I'm Jules.
I'm Vicky.
And I'm Rebecca. We're your hosts. We're also couples therapists and messy humans bumbling through our own relationships every day.
We met through our training and practice of relational life therapy. Between us, we have more than 40 years of experience holding hard relational questions with our clients. We're going to bring those questions here.
And together, we're going to take a stab at answering those questions. This podcast is not a substitute for therapy. If something you hear in this podcast stirs something deep within you about your relationship, reach out to a couples therapist in your area.
And this episode's listener question.
We sat down and figured out what our love languages were. So why does my partner not use that information to express their love to me?
Love languages. They are not my favorite thing.
I am medium about them.
I love them superficially, and I like to go deeper with them.
So fun. This is great because we have lots of different opinions here.
Yeah. I pretty much loathe them.
Okay, get into it, guys. Vicky, why do you love them? Rebecca, why do you hate them?
Because there's so much more when you get underneath them. Like, why might someone's language be gift giving? Or why might someone's language be gift giving or the acts of service? There's so much more when you go deeper underneath it. They don't give me enough information, I guess, therapeutically.
Yeah. All right. So if you're going deeper into them, I can maybe play with you there. I can play in that sandbox. But my impression of love languages isn't that they teach people to go deeper. It's that they are this pop culture, pop psychology kind of way of dealing with relationships where you're supposed to know me in this particular way. And if we've gone through this and I've told you what my love languages are, then you're supposed to adapt everything about who you are and how you know how to love in the world to meet me in this place where this is what I want to receive from you.
I would agree that that's how they're presented too. Yeah.
And this is why I'm medium on them, because I don't love that part of it. And I do love getting clear about the kinds of requests we're making from our partners. Totally. I like that they're behaviorally specific. I like that they're asking for you to gain clarity on what is meaningful to you. I like, Vicky, that you're talking about dropping deeper with them. Like, what is this about for me, or how does this meet certain needs for me? So I think they're awesome as long as we don't attach to
expectations.
This now means now that you know this, you should always do it this way, or else you don't really love me.
Or else, right?
Or else it means something terrible about our relationship, or else it means that you're lazy, or else it means, like, there can be all sorts of judgments that's attached to that. So when I think about them, I think about, if you're going to use them with curiosity and with openness, and get curious about, like, going deeper, like Vicky's talking about. And then if you're going to use them in your partnership, one of my big questions is, wait, are you guys having a big conversation
about how you're going to use them,
and coming to agreements?
Yeah.
So if I haven't had, let's say my husband and I are driving on a road trip and we listen to an audiobook on love languages, and then we don't say anything about them, like interesting, whatever. And then I assume now that we're going to be doing love languages, but he's like, why is my wife sharing her therapy stuff with me? Right. That could be happening on the inside. My sweet husband actually loves all my therapy stuff. But let's just imagine for a moment that he was not in that space in that moment, and we never had an agreement. Now I'm actually operating off of an assumption that he's supposed to be doing this because now we have this shared information, but we actually don't have an agreement. So that'd be one thing I'd be really careful about. And that's not just with love languages. That's with whatever you're doing, whatever kind of exploration or vulnerability. Like, just because I say I want a thing doesn't mean my husband agreed to say, yes, I'm doing that thing. So that's where I would start is, and this is a skill, is are we actually creating agreements? Are we actually creating contracts between us? And it feels, especially if you've never talk to your partner in an agreement-y sort of way, it can feel super awkward. I remember a person I worked with for a long time was sharing something in a group that I was running. And what he shared was so insightful because somebody was complaining about some of these skills we're learning feel really awkward. And he said, yeah, of course they feel awkward. We live in a super relationally unhealthy culture.
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
And they feel awkward because we've never done them before. And everything you're beginning to do that you've never done before feels awkward.
Yeah. It's a new skill.
Exactly. And so if you take any of these skills, or you try out any of these skills, you say, I want to make an agreement with my partner. I want you to go into it expecting it to feel awkward if you have never done that before.
It strikes me that this is so much about, like, we're talking about contracts, we're talking about agreements, we're talking about consent. Do you know, are you buying into this the way that I'm buying into this? Are we on the same page? And if one of us isn't, can we tell each other that?
Which goes in with direct request. Let's have a conversation about this, which also goes into mind reading.
Right.
Let's put it out there.
Now that you know, we know, let's say we've talked about our love languages and we've had that conversation. Maybe we've even made the agreement. And maybe we've even said, like, you know, I want you to understand me better. And so I'm glad that you now know that this is the way I want to be loved and cherished and tended to. And, you know, I prefer this over that. Now that you know that, if you don't follow through on that, then what? And what am I making up about it at that point? Right? Am I making up that, well, that must mean that you don't love me? Or am I moving into a place where maybe we can have another conversation? And that conversation can be about, like, what's happening there? What's happening where we've talked about this, and I'm just kind of curious, when you see me hurting, why you keep doing that thing that I don't really like when you know that this is the thing I like.
Yeah, I think of it as meta conversations is that skill where we move out of the specific thing and we move into observing together larger patterns and getting curious about larger patterns.
Yeah.
So if you've already made an agreement, whether it's about the love agreement about who's going to empty the dishwasher, if you've made an agreement about how you guys are going to talk about sex, whatever. So let's say you've made an agreement and that agreement is not being stuck to. I'd pull back and look at that. One, does that actually happen a lot in this relationship? So do we need to look at it over the course of all agreements? Let's have a larger conversation about what's happening. Are you agreeing when you don't actually mean it? Are you feeling forced by me to say yes to agreements? Is there something going on where you're forgetting a lot?
Mhm.
What is it that's
What
up
is it?
with that? Or is it only this one? So generally the agreements are kept. Okay, now I'm curious. Generally the agreements are kept, but this one isn't being kept. So I'm curious what's going on. So it could be, you could take meta conversations either direction, but meta conversation is a skill that I don't think a lot of couples are using. We're staying in the moment and in the fight of this one thing instead of taking a moment when things are calm to
Where we
pull
pull
back.
back. Mhm. Yeah.
Which
where
you can't do in the moment either. As
No.
I have a history of doing, this is your pattern. You're doing it now. You did it last week. You did it then.
Yeah, that's never going to work. Why not, Vicky?
I don't know.
You don't know why it doesn't work?
Well, I can. Well, there's multiple reasons why it doesn't work. The nice one that Terry taught me at training is because I'm his wife, not his therapist, and his patterns are not my business.
Boundaries.
I didn't like being told that. Then I made
You remembered it.
I did. Oh, well, then I made the mistake of coming home and telling my husband that. And so he has fun pointing that out when I do it still.
It also doesn't work because we're in our adaptation right then. So when you're in your protective self, it's not a time to have a meta conversation. So meta conversations require curiosity, and that requires the front part of your brain to be working. So you only want to have meta conversations when you're pretty well resourced and when things are going pretty well. Because otherwise your brain will hijack you.
When both of you are pretty well resourced.
That's right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. You don't want to spring a meta conversation on somebody while they're triggered because they're not able to join. Literally, physiologically, their brain cannot do what you were asking them to do.
So for a lot of people, starting a conversation is we need to have a conversation. Like starting with that kind of like we need to talk or we need to have a conversation will actually trigger some people.
Oh, totally.
Just that setup. And so I think that that's just an important piece is that if we're talking about meta conversations, how we enter into those conversations, how we cultivate the space for them is equally important to the fact that we have them.
Yep, totally. So we need to is very different than I'd love to explore this with you, or I'd love to have a bigger conversation about a pattern. Is now an okay time, or would it be better later in the weekend?
Yeah. Or even just like, can we circle back to what happened the other day? Because I had some observations I wanted to share with you.
Yeah. Are you in a space you can listen to that right now?
Yeah.
And
maybe just one more little piece is that I think sometimes it really helps when we bring in observations when we start with what we observe about ourselves.
Good point. Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, like if I have this pattern of always observing what I see in you as your patterns, it comes off really different than I notice that I do this when this happens.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, something else about the love language thing in particular, because it's such a short list. There's 5 things I think on there. So when you have a really short list like that and you've identified 1 or 2 or 3 things that are yours, you're going to notice every single time they don't do it now because you're hyper focused on whether or not they do it. And so it's a really good way to set yourself up for some grief in your relationship. Grief is always part of relationships. I'm a big advocate of not running from our grief. I'm a big advocate of embracing the little mini griefs that we're in every single day. And I just want to help people wrap their heads around like, oh, if I put this request out there, then I might be a little bit hyper vigilant on moments when you don't make it. It's kind of going back to that thing we were talking about we have a little bit of a negative focus in our brain.
Yeah. And it sets up that filter for us.
So let's wrap it there for today.
Sounds perfect.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
That wraps up this week's episode. Join us again next week for another Why Does My Partner?
We hope that you continue to listen wherever you get your audio and that you'll follow the show.
To go deeper, join us at our bootcamp. You'll find the next date at whydoesmypartner.com.